Women just don't have the head for this kind of thing, Richa said as he leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head like he'd just delivered some grand revelation. It's nothing personal, Sandra. Finance is a game. Kevin's the obvious choice for something like this. Sitting across the table, my jaw tightened while I stared at the spreadsheet I'd spent countless hours building. My fingers twitched, itching to crumple the documents in front of me. But I held my composure. Richard, I said evenly, I've been managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for 6 years. My firm consistently ranks in the top 5 across our region. He waved a hand, brushing my words aside. I'm sure you're great at what you do there, but this is family. We need someone who understands our goals, and Kevin knows what's at stake. Kevin, who was seated next to him with a smug look plastered across his face, looked like he had already won the lottery. At 24, fresh out of business school and without even a basic grasp on personal budgeting, he was suddenly their financial golden boy bee, 'cause he was Richard's biological son. Apparently, that made him a prodigy. I looked over at Kevin, annoyed by his arrogance, even more than his lack of experience. So, Kevin, I said, keeping my voice calm, what's your approach to managing the portfolio? He blinked clearly. Unprepared? Well, I was thinking of starting with some high-growth tech stocks, ride the wave. Richard nodded with approval. Exactly. Bold moves. That's what this portfolio needs. My stomach turned. Bold moves. That was their strategy. I had spent the last decade carefully weighing risk against reward, crafting diversified portfolios, studying markets in depth, and now, apparently, all that wasn't enough. Why? Because I was a woman. My name's Sandra, and for as long as I can remember, I've had to fight to be taken seriously in finance. I worked my way up in a male-dominated field where being underestimated was the norm, but this felt different. This wasn't just some colleague making a throwaway remark during a meeting. This was my stepfather choosing my stepbrother who had no experience, no credentials, and no real understanding over me. That I joined Richard's family when I was 12, after my mother he'd always been strict but fairer, so I thought, for years he treated Kevin and me equally, but over time, his favoritism for Kevin became obvious. And now, it couldn't be more blatant. This portfolio wasn't just a hobby, it represented years of planning meant to ensure the entire family's future. I had spent weeks reviewing every figure, creating a balanced strategy to generate solid returns while minimizing risk. But none of that mattered. Richard's bias ran far deeper than I had ever imagined. On my drive home that evening, I could barely process my frustration. It's not personal, Richard had said, but nothing could have felt more personal. I had spent years proving myself in a competitive field, only to have my own family act like my experience meant nothing. When I walked through the door, my husband Mike was in the kitchen prepping dinner. How'd it go? He asked, smiling. I dropped my bag on the counter and sighed. It was a disaster. Richard gave the portfolio to Kevin. Apparently, women just don't belong in finance. Mike frowned, putting the knife down. He actually said that word for word, I muttered as I poured myself a glass of water. And Kevin! He just sat there grinning like he'd already made his first million. Mike shook his head. That's ridiculous. You've been in this game for years. Kevin probably doesn't even know what a balance sheet looks like. Exactly, I said, my voice rising. But none of it matters. Richard sees me as a risk and Kevin as a reward even, though the numbers say otherwise. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to waste more energy trying to change Richard's mind. I'd let my work do the talking. My firm's portfolio was already performing well, and I was on track to lead a major project that could put my team in the spotlight. If Richard wanted to believe Kevin was a financial genius, fine. In a year, when the dust settled, we'd see whose strategy stood tall and whose collapsed under the weight of inexperience. In the following weeks, I tried to keep the family portfolio out of mind, but every time Kevin posted a smug update, like crushing it in finance on social media, or Richard casually brought up Kevin's big plans, it ignited something in me. But I stayed focused at work. Things were moving quickly. I'd been put in charge of a major client portfolio, and I poured every ounce of energy into building a rock-solid strategy. Late nights became routine. Endless hours of analysis paid off. One night, my mentor Laura leaned on my desk as I was buried in projections. You're really giving this everything? Huh? I gave a tired smile. It feels personal, I admitted. The client, she asked. No, I said, shaking my head. My stepfather, he passed me over for managing the family's portfolio, gave it to my stepbrother, said women aren't cut out for finance. Her eyes widened. He really said that?
Yep.
Well, she said, her voice firm, then let's make sure you prove him wrong. Meanwhile, back at home, Kevin's success was showing cracks. At dinner, Richard's updates grew. Good. It's a long-term strategy, he said one night. Long-term, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Code for, it's not working right now. Richard stiffened. It's none of your concern, Sandra. Kevin's got it under control. I let it go. But inside, I knew exactly what was happening. High-risk stocks, poor diversification. I'd seen it all before. It was just a matter of time. At work, things were going in the opposite direction. My portfolio was exceeding projections. Clients were thrilled. I was soon invited to speak at a regional finance conference. The night before the event, I practiced my speech in front of the mirror. A part of me considered inviting Richard and Kevin just to see their reactions when I stepped on that stage, but I let that thought pass. This wasn't about them. It was about me finally owning my place in this field. Months passed. The gap between Kevin's results and mine widened. While my name was being published in industry journals, Richard began letting slip that things weren't going well on Kevin's end. It's been a rough quarter, he admitted at dinner one evening. Kevin's portfolio took some hits. What kind of hits? I asked, glancing up. He hesitated. Nothing major, just some setbacks. Kevin, quiet all evening, finally spoke up. It's a tough market. No one's seeing big returns. That's not true, I said, almost without thinking. If managed well, a lot of portfolios are thriving. The room went quiet. Not everyone gets to work with institutional clients, Richard snapped. Family portfolios are different. I bit my tongue. Let them believe what they wanted. I had nothing to prove. My numbers were doing the talking. When the year mark hit, Kevin's portfolio was floundering. Meanwhile, I was being honored with an award for innovative portfolio management. On stage that night, I thought of Richard and Kevin not with resentment, but with quiet triumph. 2 weeks later, Richard called. "I saw your name in the Financial Times," he said. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied calmly. "I had no idea your firm was doing so well. I underestimated you." "You did," I said. "But I appreciate you saying that." The turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, my husband called me at work, almost laughing. "You won't believe this, Richard's glued to the TV. They just featured your firm on Market Watch Live. They said your name." He hasn't said a word in 20 minutes. The next day, Richard called again. "I watched the segment," he said quietly. "Your results are impressive. I may have misjudged you." Later that week, I visited him. Kevin wasn't there. Richard handed me a folder. "These are the latest figures from the portfolio. Thought you might want to take a look." The losses were worse than I'd expected. "I wanted to give Kevin a chance," he said. "But after seeing your work, I realized I was wrong." I looked up for the first time. I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "I owe you an apology. I let bias cloud my judgment. You've always deserved more credit." I paused, letting his words settle. "Thank you. That means a lot. But now we need to focus on fixing this." "I'd like you to take over," he said. For the next hour, I walked him through my strategy. By the end, I saw something shift in him respect. "Finally, you didn't have to do this," he said, "but you did. That says a lot." "This isn't about proving anything," I said. "It's about doing what's right." From that point on, everything changed. At family dinners, Richard gave me credit. Kevin stayed quiet, the weight of failure setting in. And for once, I didn't feel the need to gloat. I'd already won.